Yeah, good evening, everyone. So, last session we discussed Redux related features. So, we need to implement in one example. Without Redux, I showed you process. You tried. Hmm? So, you tried how to handle that shopping cart like example I showed you. Huh? So, I will give a Redux basic process example. You implement and let me know, is it working fine or not? Okay, the process I will show you, you have to try, right? So what is that? Yesterday I told you that in Redux you can centralize the data, you can store the data centralized so that we can access and use from any component. So how to keep the data centralized, how to handle the actions centralized, we need to learn. That we will see here. There are so many steps now. First step, that means implementing Redux. So in application, for that first step, actually different people have different approach. Generally, sometimes people directly give actions and store and state, only three, depending on requirements. I will give a traditional approach, which is followed by majority of real world environments. Everybody need not to follow the same. Okay. So sometimes you will see people implementing Redux in a simple store and reducer concept. But in real world environment, some traditions we have to follow. Step by step process we need to implement. Such scenario I will explain, and you can try that. You can try the scenario and you can implement it. Actually, first step one. So in the first step, what we have to do is, so we have to create. So we have to create a Redux slicer. We have to create a Redux slicer. Many people may not be aware of this slicer who already working with Redux, and even when you go through some examples, exercises on Redux, so you will not see many examples using these slicers. But traditionally in large scale projects, you will find a slicer. So we can use a slicer, we can create a slicer and we can use a slicer. So before this, first you have to install Redux for your project. So that is the first stage. That means install Redux for React project. You have to install Redux for React project from the official Redux store. This is Redux official library. You can get started, and here it will give you the Redux toolkit. It will give Redux toolkit for React application. Remember, for Angular, it is different. Angular, React, other JavaScript applications, it is different. So you can use everywhere actually. In this installation, so first what you have to do is you have to install Redux toolkit and enable for React. So you have to do this. You have to install Redux.js toolkit. You need to install this Redux.js toolkit. And after installing, actually we need to enable this for React. So there are so many ways of configuring and defining. There are so many ways, but we need to implement for React. if you need to implement for React, actually, so many examples will show you directly creating a template with which one Redux. This is nothing but what they are doing. They are creating a React application. While creating itself, they are adding Redux. If already application is created, then how to add Redux? That means if already application is created, this here you will see only explanation about how to create a React application directly with Redux. That means while creating application itself, you add Redux, it will allow. But for React, what we have to do is add one more extra option. So first what you do, you have to set up npm install. You have to install redux.js. So redux.js / what toolkit, and after that you can add React Redux. You can add this React Redux. That means now it will enable Redux to use for React. This is the process we need to implement. Actually, many times while creating project itself, they create Redux. That is not our situation. Our situation is already project is created. In that we want to add Redux. But adding Redux is not enough. You need to make the Redux use for React. Generally, adding Redux, people do like this. I will give this command. This is for directly creating Redux application with the TypeScript. Okay. This is directly defining there. Okay. I will put that here. So directly you can try this one. npx create React application. You can create a React application and the template is Redux with the TypeScript. Now what this is going to do is it is going to add Redux. This is existing app and this is new app. This is new app. That is nothing complicated there. First you need to do this. Let's do that. So we will go to our project. And in this project, this is TypeScript React application. Okay. Now in this project, which is already created, I want to use Redux. Then let's open the terminal. And in this, we will see here npm install. So that is redux.js / toolkit. Okay, and we need to add what? React Redux. This is the library we are installing. Directly, if you are creating an application and while creating itself, you know that you are going to use Redux, then there is another process. You can just put a template Redux. It will add Redux library by default. That means your project is created along with Redux. But after project is created, later you want to add, then you need to follow these steps. You need to handle this. Okay, so React, Redux and Redux toolkit both are installed. So once these are installed, now we can start using this. Actually, Redux library provides a lot of classes and modules. In this, what is the first step? First step is better to create a slicer. You see, even in official website also, directly you will see that they will show you, you can create a store and you create reducer and you define state and actions and directly define them. But at large scale projects, you will find they cleanly separate everything. That means slicers will be separate, store will be separate, and reducers will be separate. They cleanly separate so that it is easy for them to later extend and easy for them to later test, perform unit testing, and perform extensions, means adding new features and all. Actually, what is slicer? Slicer is not used by everybody who use Redux, but what is advantage of slicer is actually slicer can keep information, can keep details like, it can keep details like initial state. It can keep details like actions. Usually a slicer contains information about initial state and actions. Generally, sometimes people, what they do is they directly mention this in a component. They directly mention in the component the initial state, means not in the component. You have seen, I told you use reducer. Directly in the reducer file itself, they will mention about initial state. In our use reducer example, I showed you, in initial state is configured directly inside reducer. But we don't do like that. Generally, we will create a slicer. In that, we need to handle this initial state and actions. Actually, we will create a slicer just by name. It will have a lot of details, like initial state, actions. It will have a name. What is the slicer name? Because an application can use values from different slicers. That means one slicer contains so one value, another slicer contains another value. Why they are named as slicers? Because we call them memory slicers. Memory slicers means in one slice, it will put one set of data, another slice, another set of data. All slices together is store, but every slice is independent, working for different kind of information. Generally, we keep slices of data and we serve these slices for different purpose. Generally, on YouTube channels or anywhere when you are learning about Redux or websites showing about Redux, they will directly put some store and they will directly use that store because they are going to handle with only one kind of data. But in real world projects, we use store for handling different types of data for different purpose. Then we have to create slicers and cleanly separate them. One slicer for one purpose, another slicer for another purpose, like that. But all are finally having data kept in a store. All they are kept in a store. Okay. Now, how do we define the slicer? Is actually we need to add a new file. You can add a file called some slicer.tsx. We need to create a file tsx, slicer.tsx. Now in the slicer, we need to import, actually we need to import create slicer from Redux store. So that means from the Redux store, we have to import. That means from Redux, we have to import create slicer. This create slicer is it is just like a hook. It is just like a hook to configure the slicers. So we need to create a slicer. We need to configure that. Generally, suppose in our example, so we are going to store some data. In our example, what data we are going to store? We are going to store carts. Yesterday showed you cart items, another one cart count. These are the two details we want to store. So generally in cart slicer, what we do, we will configure a constant initial state. I'm just giving syntax first. Initial state. In this initial state, we will have two values. One is cart items is one array. Another one is cart items count. Cart items is an array and cart items is an array. Another one is cart items count. It is a simple number. So initially when application starts, now the two values are stored in the memory. What are those two values? In the store, two values are stored. One is cart items, another one cart items count. What is cart items? Cart items is empty array and count is an number. Now what should happen is you need to configure a slicer. That means we are creating a constant cart slicer. We are giving the name cart slicer. This cart slicer is a slicer type. That means we have to define it is of what? Create slicer, and it usually have some settings to configure. We have to create a slicer and the name of the slicer is cart slicer. What this class cart slicer is going to manage? It is going to manage this data. Then actually we define a name for the slicer. Suppose the name is cart and we define initial value. What is the initial state? We configure the initial state and we have reducers. We configure reducers. Reducers indicates what actions to perform. That means what slicer contains? Slicer contains information about slicer slicer name and what are the initial values it has to manage and what and when the data need to be updated in the store. What data need to be updated, when it should be updated, that is decided by reducers. Actually reducers is a function. This reducers function take two values. What are those? This reducers will take two values actually. What it will do? It is going to handle two things. One is state. State is any kind of data. Another one, it is going to manage action. It is going to manage the action. Now, what is the concept of state and action? So state indicates what is the data to be stored. What is the data to be stored? Cart items is one. Another one, cart items count is one. But remember, when these items need to be added, updated, and when they need to be handled, that is decided by what? Actions. We need to configure by using actions. That means actually this reducers will use, actually this is lengthy process. This reducers is a collection. In the collection, we have to define a function. Means you can put action 1, that is what functionality it should do, you have to tell. So, and you need to define action 2, like this, what functionality it can perform. You can define any number of actions. Previously, you remembered we used add to cart, remove cart like actions. In use reducer, we defined actions. Reducer defines what are the actions to perform. Currently, suppose I am defining one action. What is the action to perform? The action name is add to cart. Add to cart is action. What this will do, it will take a state which is any type and it will define an action. Now what this add to cart have to update? It should update two details. One is state dot what? Cart items into the cart items. That means what this state will do, it will take this initial state. In initial state, two members are there. What are those members? Cart items. Another one, cart items count. Into the cart items, what we have to do, it's an array. Yesterday you saw that it is expecting a payload. I told you payload. We need to send a payload. Payload means data. Into that, how to send the data? We have to use a push. Data comes from add to cart button click. When user clicks add to cart button click, a product information is sent as a payload. That information will be stored here. That means who is going to send the information? The action is going to send the information in the form of a payload. In the form of a payload. Action payload is nothing but it is accessing the details of a product and pushing that product information into these items. This is one step it will do. What is the next one? Next one, we have another state. This is what? Cart items, what? Count. Cart items count. Cart items count. What should be this cart items count? So the count of cart items, how we manage this cart items count will come from, what is that? State dot what? Cart items dot length. How many elements are there? Their length will come here. This is how we need to configure a slicer. This is a very rare type of representation and settings you will see by anybody who is using Redux. But it is not rare at large scale projects. It is very common approach we do. Why? Because majority of Redux related examples that you are going to learn, they will not use all features of Redux. They are using only 1-2 concepts of Redux, and their main purpose is using Redux for storing data for React application. That is the reason they don't concentrate on all other specifications that Redux store is providing. They will concentrate on two things. One is store, another reducer with actions, only these two. That is the reason this approach looks something new. You will not find this kind of approach everywhere, but this is a good traditional approach for large scale projects where you have to maintain Redux store for large amount of data, different kinds of data. Then this is the best approach. Actually, people working at high technologies like Java, .NET based technologies, when they are integrating React into Java and .NET like technologies, and they are developing rich ERP like packages, these kind of situations will come, right? But it's good to have an idea of this. That is slicer. So what is the purpose of a slicer? The purpose of a slicer is it is going to maintain initial state. It is going to define what are the actions to perform, and it is going to define what need to be performed on that particular action. That means what is the data to be updated on that particular action. We are updating two details. What are those? Cart items. Another one is cart items count. Cart items count. But remember, you created a slicer, but this slicer is not ready to use because you just created a slicer constant and you created initial state constant. This is add to cart. Add to cart is an action. That means now these are not ready to be used outside this file. Our main purpose is creating this file is, our main purpose of creating this file is so that you can inject in any location and you can use it. Reusability concerns. But these are not accessible outside the file. Because you know that every module is independent and you cannot access them outside. You know how to access outside? Actually, we have to export. We have to export. Actually, we need to export two things. One is we need to export add to cart. We need to export add to cart. Add to cart is what? Add to cart is what? Add to cart is an action. Export, we have to export add to cart. Add to cart is an action. Add to cart is an action. This export add to cart, we have to define. So we have to use cart slicer dot actions. This is how we define. That means whatever the actions are defined inside this slicer, inside the slicer, what are the action defined? Add to cart. Action means nothing but reducers. Reducers define actions. That means whatever actions are there, that is defined by reducer. Let me give reducers is for, I will give a command. This is reducer configures actions. Already I showed you in reducer, use reducer defined actions. Now the slicer actions are configured into add to cart. Another one also you have to export. What you have to export? So you need to export this cart slicer actions, and you need to export the initial state also. We need to configure initial state. But once you export this, now this is accessible outside. That means you can access anywhere outside. Otherwise, when you try to use add to cart like action, it will say it is not in a module. It is not in the module scope. Why it is not in the module scope? Because anything to be in module scope need to be exported if you want to use from another location, So this is important, right? Cart slicer, right? Where we misspelled create slice. Right. So the slicer name, this is the slicer name. That is the slicer name we are defining. So cart slicer and actions. Okay, right. Now, once you created the slicer, it is ready. Slicer is ready. Next step, what we have to do? After configuring the slicer, what slicer contains? Step 2, slicer contains information about what is the data to be stored and when it is need to be updated. What is the data to be stored and when it is need to be updated, it is defined by slicer. After defining slicer, now we need to configure the store. That means we need to store the data. This data need to be stored. That means what we have to do is, second step, you have to configure store. Actually configure store by creating a store. We have to separately create a store. This store will use your slicer and it will access the data coming from the slicer and handle it. That means now store, why we need to configure the store? The purpose of configuring store is nothing but it is used to access data from slicer and handle the actions from slicer. Whatever the actions are defined in slicer, whatever the data is defined in slicer, that is managed by store. What you have to do is you have to add a new file store.tsx. You have to add store.tsx. Now you need to create a store. Actually, you need to configure the store and define the store. So that means what we have to do is, so you need to create a store. In that we need to define all the actions. Actually, this you have to import create store. Actually, we have create store. So from Redux, you have to create store. Redux toolkit will be there. I am just using rough syntax there, right? So you have to import this create store and you have to create explode function. So, and the function is you are creating a store here. You need to define some store. Create store. You need to configure the create store, and here we need to define the store. So what actually the store have to do is, actually this is just like, this is also export you can create like this. That means you say constant. So that is store is equal to, what is the concept here? We have to define create store. Usually what this create store have to do is it should use reducer. That means reducer defines what is the action to be performed. Actually it uses a store. Reducer uses a store and it is coming from cart slicer. It is coming from cart slicer. You have to import the cart slicer here. You have to import cart slicer. So from your path, whatever the path is there where you created the slicer. So what is the point here is actually you defined what is the data and you defined what are the actions. Where you defined them? Slicer. Slicer contains the data and actions. And these data and actions are configured. After configuring, this data must be stored and these actions must be handled. That where the data must be stored, a store must be created. You just mentioned in the slicer what to store and when to update. These only details you mentioned, but there is no store created at all. If there is no store created, then you cannot store the data. You just mentioned what data to store. You mentioned when the data need to be updated, but there is no store created. That store we are creating now. Now, what is the store we created? We created a store. And what data it will use? The data coming from whom? Cart slicer. What actions will do? That means store is going to use, store is used to access data from slicer and handle actions from slicer. Data and actions of slicer coming from cart slicer. We are assigning the cart slicer to store. That means it is going to manage two things. What are those? Actions. Another one, it is going to handle state. State is nothing but initial state. Whatever the data is there, state is nothing but data. So slicer defined what are the data, what is the data and what are the actions. But the data is really stored and it is managed here. This is the second step. In the second step, you need to define the store. Now, at which level this store must be used? At which level this store must be used so that it can access by all components? At which level this store must be used? This store must be used at application level. Na? It must be used at application level. How you will centralize the store? You will centralize the store at application level. And in any service architecture, who is going to locate your data and send the data? To locate the data and send the data, you need a provider. Na? That means at application level, you need a provider. That provider is responsible for locating your data and providing the data into your applications. That means at application level, the data is stored. Then what is the application level? Step 3. Third step is application level. What is your application level? Application level means what we have to do? Configure store at application level. Configure store at application level using provider. You have to use a provider. You have to configure the store at application level. That means where I should go? You should go to the file, go to file, which is index.tsx. In index.tsx, what we have to do is you have to use a provider. You have to use a provider. This provider is going to use a store. That store is coming from this store. Understood? This store contains what? It contains actions and it contains initial state. That means data and actions are defined in the store. This store is configured to the provider. Now what this provider can do? This provider can provide the data and actions to any component that is running here. That means any component which is running inside the application scope. So to that, it will provide the data. So first step, define initial state and actions. Second step, create a store and store the data. Third step, define a provider which locates your store and provides to applications. Means provides to components, any component. This is how we need to define. Remember, these are all members of Redux store. Means a Redux library. Provider, create slicer, create store. All these are the members of Redux store. Now, after that, so data is ready. Now, any component can consume and handle this. That means you can handle that. That means what we will do, step 4. Step 4 is nothing but you have to configure actions and send the data into store. You have to configure the actions and send data into store. That means now you design your UI and you tell what data to be sent. You tell what data to be sent. That means send data into it. Send data into it. That means now what we have to do, you add some component. You add some component dot what tsx. In this component, you need to define action. What is our example? We are creating a shopping cart example. In that we are using add to cart. When you are using add to cart, what should happen? That means we write a simple event. Now it has to trigger the action, send the data into the store. And who is going to trigger the action? So actions are triggered by, so the actions are triggered by who? In use reducer hook, who triggered the action? Who sent the data? Actions are triggered by dispatcher. Actions are triggered by dispatcher. So you need a dispatcher. That means now in this component, what you have to do is, suppose you just write a function. You just write a function. What is the function? Some add to cart click. Okay. On add to cart click, what we have to do is actually we have to import dispatcher. We have to import dispatcher from Redux. You have to import dispatcher from Redux. Actually, it is use dispatcher, right? It is use dispatcher. You have to import dispatcher from Redux. And what you have to do is you need to configure a constant. So that means dispatcher is equal to use dispatcher. That is the hook actually. What this dispatcher can do, this dispatcher can dispatch data to an action. What is the action name? A dispatcher can dispatch the action. What is the action name? Action name is add to cart. Add to cart is the action. You see, add to cart is the action. Add to cart is the action. You created add to cart action. Into this action, we need to send the data payload. We need to send the data. That means add to cart dispatch. This will dispatch. What is the data? Some product information. That means we are sending this product as a payload to add to cart. Through dispatcher, we are sending this. Now what will happen? This product information is sent to this add to cart function. That means what add to cart will do? It will come to slicer now. It will come to slicer. What slicer will do? It will collect the payload. Payload coming from the dispatch. Dispatcher is sending an action and your slicer can recognize the action coming from dispatcher. Your slicer can recognize the action coming from a dispatcher and it will identify that the action is add to cart and it will send the data into this and this data will be pushed into cart items. After data is pushed into cart items, you will get the cart items length and it is updated. Now this is kept in a store. This is now from here, this is add to cart slicer. Now this is data. Whenever you update, this data is immediately sent into store. that data is immediately sent into store. That means now store contains two details, cart items, another one cart items count. Cart items count. And that is what you can access and use in your application. And this is just creating store, sending data into store and defining actions. There is another point now. Another process is what we have to collect the store and use the store. To collect the store and use the store, you have to use context. That means you have a Redux context. By using Redux context, you can access the memory and you can collect the data and you can display the data. Anywhere you can display the data. So that means whatever data is stored, you can handle that. This is the process of working with Redux store. Remember, this much lengthy concept will not be in every situation, right? Generally, whenever anybody is creating a Redux store, examples and all, they will not go this much complex. They will simply say plus increment 1 minus decrement 0. These kind of examples are not great to understand at high level, right? So maximum everybody will give you example count 1, count minus. That is what the general examples you will see everywhere, right? But that doesn't make a lot of understanding sense at high level. That's the reason, even if it is little bit confusion and risk, you need to understand the process very clearly. I know that first time it is very confusion, right? Because if you are manually handling use reducer by yourself, then it looks little easy. But you never tried reducer, which we discussed earlier, then you are listening to this concept, it looks very complicated, right? It is complicated, but it has a simple, smooth process. Order, create slicer, configure the store, and use the provider to access and dispatch the actions. Actually, we implemented this process actually. This is the process we implemented. What is the process we implemented? Yesterday I showed you, no? Yeah, this is the process we have to implement. Then I will show you. Yeah, that's the cycle we have to maintain actually. This is the cycle we have to maintain. That means now these actions, this reducer, this store, this state, that means actually what I have done now is the actions, this reducer, actually this I defined by using slicer, okay? By using slicer. So, and here this store I created by using store.tsx. TSX. And this is actually your component. This is your component.tsx. From there, the actions are triggered. Those actions will come to slicer. The slicer will store and it will store the data and provide through a state. This state will provide again to the component and this continuous cycle will happen. Right now, this is the process we created. Internally, we configured this process. Let's see how we can implement this, right? One example is there, I will upload. This is the process we have to create. I hope you understood all the concept, right? So what is the purpose of slicer? Configure initial state and configure the actions. After slicer is ready, what we have to do? Configure the store so that you can get the data from the slicer and it can be stored, centralized, and design a provider because your store need to be provided to all components. And after that, design the actions that tell when and what data need to be stored from your component. This is the process you need to implement. Let's implement this. So I will add these files here. Already I have some files just created already. Package JSON, let's see, Redux toolkit is installed, right? And make sure that Redux toolkit is there and React Redux is also there. These two are very important. These two are important to deal with Redux, because Redux individually cannot work with React. So for that, you need a helper library, that is React Redux library. And for example, if Redux is used in Angular like technologies, they use another concept, NGRX. There is another supportive library, NGRX. By using that, they handle. So this is okay, fine. Now we need to add these all concepts here. Let's say actually we can have different scenarios. I will put here, I will put a new name, slicers. This is slicers. So I created a folder called slicer, and I will create another folder in SRC. Another one is stores. We have slicers and stores. These are, because I told you that if you are dealing with large scale projects, it's not one slicer, there will be lot. So many slicers we need to configure and define them. So I will add this a new file. What is it? Slicer.tsx. This is slicer.tsx, and here let me copy the code. This is the code we written. So create slicer, you have to import. Actually, you have to import create slicer. So create slicer, you have to slicer. Yeah. So create slicer, you have to import create slicer. Yeah, from toolkit. You have to import this. And you can create a new slicer and you can configure the slicer. Already code is written. I will just copy that. I will open the code which is completely written. I will just open that. Already sample example is there. Yep. So this is the code. Already we installed this. Yeah. This is the slicer. Already we imported this. Let me copy that and paste it. This is defining the slicer. This is defining the slicer. As I showed you, everything same, no change. Right. What we done, we created initial state. Initial state contains two items. What are those? Cart items and cart count. And we created a cart slice. Cart slice contains what? Create slice. What is the name? Cart. It contains initial state, reducer. Reducer is what? Add to cart. Add to cart is a function. Right. In that function, two parameters are there. One is state, another action. What should happen? Cart items push payload, and cart count get the length and update. Export add to cart from actions, and export cart slicer from reducers. These two things you have to do. Otherwise, you cannot use actually. That means you cannot use this cart slice. You cannot use from another project, means another component, if you don't export that. Make sure that it is exported. Default is not mandatory. Default means, if it is default export, that means it is ready in the memory. You have to just access. You don't need to tell where to start, where to stop. This is what we call eager loading. I told you that, right? Now slice is ready. Okay, next what we have to do? We have to create a store as per the syntax. Let's create a store. Store dot what? TSX. Store also I configured in the same way. Let me copy this. So we will copy this store also, configuring the store. So we have to import store and you need to manage the store. This is how you need to define the store. This is store also configured. And we need to import from cart slicer. Where is the cart slicer? So import. We have to import, what is it? Cart slice. So cart slice from, we will use import from, it is coming from // slicers. What is the folder name? Slicers. Yeah. Slicers. Okay. From this folder, we have to import what? What is the name of this? Cart slice. We have to import from cart slice. And where is it? From this file name. The module name is not there. It is a slicer dot. Yeah. So that is slicer. From there, we have to import cart slice. We are exporting cart slice only. And here we need to define the store. What is it? Cart slice. Yeah. So we are configuring the store. The store is going to store the data. What is the data? It is going to store coming from cart slice. That is the name you given. What names we given, better we follow the same names, right? So cart slicer, it is imported from the slicer and it is assigned. Okay, next step. Now you can use this in your app index.tsx. In index.tsx, we have to import the store. So what we have to do? Import. We need to import what? Configure store. From which location? Store from the location is dot. It is a /. Stores. In that store, we have a store. We need to configure the store. And what is the name here in the store? It is defined as default. Default means you don't need this brace. It is default store. Okay. That means we are importing the store. And here we need a provider to configure. So what we have to do, we need to use a provider. Actually, provider we have to import from React Redux. And actually this provider will use store. And that store is coming from the store that you have defined. That's it. That means a store is created by this name. The store is created by this name. And you see, it automatically identifies that store contains 2 items. What are those 2 items? One is cart items. Another one is cart count. How the store knows that? Because you imported this store and this store is actually using a slicer. Slicer tells what is the data. Slicer will define what is the data need to be handled. So you configured the slice. Okay, now we need to just define trigger. We need a dispatcher which can send data into it. Let's create a dispatcher. So which component we are using? In the index, there is a component called shopping component. In the shopping component, we will write a logic for collecting all the data and displaying. I think there is already logic for collecting all the products, and it is displaying all the products. But we will just design this in a simple basic card style so that we can add, right? One small option I will create here. So what should happen? So we will just put a div. So in the div, this I will keep an image. And in the image, we will display what? SRC is product dot image. Okay. And we are defining width some 100 and height also some 100. And just beside this, below this, we will keep a div. And here we will put an option like this is not ordered list. This also we will give as a div. Okay. And this will have a button called, we'll keep a button called add to cart. Okay. That is add to cart button. Let's start this project. NPM start. Actually, every product have add to cart button, and when user clicks add to cart, it must be added into cart items, and it should be centrally stored in our Redux store. It should be stored in the Redux store. Let's see. So the data is loading. Let's check. You have all these items add to cart is there. Just one key is missing. So we will configure this as a class key. Key is product dot ID. Now I will just keep this also with a style. I am not using bootstrap here. Then display as flex. flex. And we have, so we have another flex as what? Wrap. And I need to keep these two in one div. Okay. Just a presentation. I am just keeping side by side them. This is repeating. This I need to give for the parent container, like here. Fine. Now this is what we are defining. So these are just items are there. Okay. Flex. Flex direction. I will keep as column. Okay. Okay. Now you see here in this, let's keep this. Where is our add to cart button click should work? Huh? Let's open this. Yeah. Now, when user clicks on this add to cart, this item must be stored in our state. That means it should be stored in Redux store, right? I showed you previously to install Redux toolkit. Huh? You see here, there is Redux related extension installed. This is Redux extension here. And you can see in the Redux extension, this is Redux extension actually. Currently, it is showing what are the actions and what are the states. You can see in this is debugger. Huh? In the debugger, you can see state contains two things: cart items, another one cart count. And it is in which location? Store. That means a centralized store is created. This is Redux debugger. So this will not be there generally in every browser. You have to add this as a extension. You can add extension. You know extensions, right? Browser extensions. You can go to Chrome extensions. You can go to Edge extensions and you can add them, right? Now see here carefully. The store is currently having two options: cart items empty, cart count empty. When to trigger an action into them? Currently action is also empty. There is no action. So now when user clicks add to cart, we need to push this into centralized store there. We need to push this. Remember, this is tree. There is chart view. There is raw view of items. It will give a chart view for you, how the state, store, and what data it is going to handle. It will give you a tree view, which will show what it is going to handle. Now see, on add to click, we need to send the product as a payload. How to write? So we have to write a function here. For that, you need a dispatcher. Na? That means here you need to import two things. What is it? Import use dispatch from React Redux. React Redux. In React Redux, you have to import use dispatch. You have to use. Another one is required. Another one is action. What is the action name? You have to import. What is the action name? Add to cart. Add to cart from slicer. You have to import add to cart from slicer. That is the action to be defined. Now we will write a function here. So what is the function? The function indicates add to cart click. On add to cart click, we are expecting a product. Product what type? Any type. Any type product we are expecting. And we need to send there. So using dispatcher, you need to configure dispatch. Dispatch is equal to use dispatch. Now this dispatch have to send. So what we have to do? Dispatch what to send? Action name. What is the action name? Add to cart. Into add to cart action, what is the data? Payload. It is asking payload. Payload is what? Product information. The product information will be sent as payload. This is the data it will push into that location. Now what we will do? Add to cart should fire up, and into that we need to send product. Then this time event you have to write like this. You need to send some custom parameter. Remember, event arguments, default event arguments E, but any custom argument you want to pass, then what you have to do? Write on click. On click is equal to, here you can directly write like a function. And what is the function? It have to use add to cart click. Add to cart click is a function. Into that add to cart click function, we need to send the current product. That is how you can send custom parameter. If your event is expecting some custom parameters, then you can just write a function here, and that function will call the function you configured, and into that it will send your own data. Whatever data is there, it can be sent. That means now the data is pushed into it. So now let's run this and see. And add to cart, what will be done? The current product information will be sent, and that will be sent to your data store through a dispatcher. Let's check this now. Our store is ready. I am adding this one, the jewelry one I am adding. Click on add to cart. When I click on add to cart, you can see now cart item count is 1. And in the cart items, you see the action name. The action name is add to cart. And you see the cart item. One item is there. That is item ID is 5. That means the item is now ready and it is stored in the store. It is available in the store. That means you see action. The action is add to cart click. What is the payload? Payload is this product. And where that information is stored, it is stored inside the cart items, and count is updated. And see the difference here. It will show previously, difference is previously it is 0, currently it is 1. It will show all the information to you. You can see a chart view. You can see cart items updated with 1 record. It is added with 1. Suppose I am clicking on another one, another item I added, add to cart, then another one is added. Now the cart items is updated, and you can see second time triggered, and the state contains tree. In the tree, you can see now the items are 2 and the cart count is 2. This is your centralized data. That means now this data that is present, you can use in any component in your application. Now the concept is how to access the data and use. For that, what you have to do, you have to create a context. You create a context. Through the context, you can fetch the data present in store and you can use it. Because context is given through a provider, that means now you need a service. Through the service, you need to inject this data into any component and you can use. For that, we generally create our custom context. We create our own context. Through the context, we inject this data. You learned about context, use context hook. That use context hook, what it is doing with the help of provider, it is collecting the data and injecting into components. So you have to create a context which can display the data. This is the process how we have to configure and define. Right. So data is now ready and it is stored in the Redux store. And for that, you have to install this Redux toolkit. You install the Redux toolkit for Edge, then it will get, right? You can go to extensions. Here it will show you extensions. Where is that extensions? You click on that extensions and you can search extensions. You can open Microsoft Edge add-ons. There what you can do, search for React Redux. There you search for React Redux dev tools. I given that in the previous use reducer concept I given. If you download and install that, then you can directly check your Redux store. You can monitor here. For developers, this is important because they need to know what data is coming, is really data is coming, or any issues are happening. This is a very lengthy process, but it is very commonly used at large scale applications. Right now, every time you will not see this kind of example, you will see only reducers actions, but better practice this. That means create a slicer, create a store, configure the provider, and dispatch the actions. In 4 stages, it will finish. And one more 5th stage is there. What is that 5th stage? Collecting the data and using. That I will explain one small scenario, how we can access the data so that you can use this in any component now. Any component can access the data and use the data, right? That example I will upload, you can try, right? That complete example I will upload, you can try. You can practice that. If there are any issues, then in tomorrow's session, I will check. Right, if you have any doubts into this, any issues are there, in tomorrow's session we will discuss. Okay, now once you know this Redux, then tomorrow I can give you overview on React Native. That means how we can build mobile applications, introduction only, because that is completely mobile platform. Separate Android, iOS knowledge is required, but I will give a basic idea of how to use React Native for building mobile applications. Right, that we'll see in tomorrow's session. Okay, right. We have 2-3 more concepts. With that we will finish. Right, after React understanding how to handle, I will give you an overview of a Webpack. Webpack means how to create a complete React application from scratch, end-to-end complete configuration. Currently we are using an existing app, right? That means we are creating through command. So we can create an app by ourselves manually, everything configured manually. But for that, you need to have a knowledge on concept called Webpack. Webpack and deployment, these 2 things we will discuss. Deployment means how we can make our React application live, deploying on cloud servers. You can deploy on any cloud servers and you can try your application working live. Right, those 2 things we have to do. With that we will finish the concept. Okay, then in the next session we'll continue. Okay, right.